Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Data Show, a video podcast featuring interviews with shrewd professionals in data science. So, as I mentioned in my first video, that I'll be sharing anything and everything about data science, which includes connecting you with specialists in the field. So, I'll be rolling out a few video podcasts with CTOs, senior data scientists, and founders of data backed startups. Now, the agenda of these podcasts will be to discuss the role of data science in different domains and fields, and to discuss what are the challenges that we are trying to solve, and how is data science being incorporated at different organizations. So, for the first video podcast, I have my friend and mentor Shweta Pathak, who is the co-founder and CTO of Elucidata. So, Elucidata is a biotech company that enables and supplements scientists at one of the world's best biomedical labs with their AI-enabled cloud platform called Poly. So we are on a video call to discuss how data science is helping us to solve problems in healthcare, and we're going to learn about the data science framework that Elucidata has designed to enable world's best pharmaceutical labs and medical institutions. And then later on, we will learn from Shatab himself how his career has panned out to become the CTO of Elucidata. So let's hear it from Shatab himself. So, hello, Shatab. Thanks for taking out your time today, and I'm really excited to have you here to talk about the rise of applied data sciences and AI to tackle the challenges in healthcare, and especially how Elucidata is advancing in this direction. So, to start off with, and before we discuss all of those questions, I'd like to ask you this very fundamental question, as there are a lot of notions around it. So, how do you unpack the term data science?
It means, I think, very different things for different people. I think for us, in our work, it essentially means going from semi-structured information to insights, right? That's very broadly, semi-structured data to insights. That whole journey is what we call data science. In our, again, in what I do, it can be variably used with bioinformatics. I mean, again, there are differences and so on. But I think data science is a more agnostic, domain agnostic term, which I think broadly represents doing whatever you do to go from data to some kind of actionable insights, actionable step that you can take. Yeah, that's how I would describe it.
Okay, so well, I think of a data scientist somewhat along the same line, someone who is coding literate and is data savvy, and loves problem solving and is curious about what's underneath the data set. So now I know that you have a lot of hats to wear, and being the co-founder and CTO of a tech company, and you have a packed schedule almost every day. But still, I mean, what are your responsibilities as the CTO of the organization, and how would you describe a regular day at Elucidata as a data scientist?
I don't have the regular day of a data scientist, I think, at Elucidata, but like in my day at least, I think a lot of time is spent just working with the teams that are doing a lot of data science, right? I mean, of course, I think as an organization, we have two sides, right? One is engineering and product heavy, and the other is more sort of data sciencey, and where you're trying to get insights from data. So I think my work, to a large extent, involves just making sure that we are on the right track, we are delivering time and again, and more strategically, we are making the right decisions about the directions that we want to move. Right, that's my day. But again, I think that looks very different for somebody who is doing data science sort of day in day out. But I think my sense would be that for a company like ours, I think they of course spend a lot of time creating models, making sure the data is prepared to generate the insights, or then finally sort of communicating it, right? Which is, I think, a big part of what we do, where there is substantial time spent in sort of communicating what we get from the data. So I think that's what the team does. I think for me, it's sort of, you know, further away from what goes on day to day, but it's ensuring that, as a data science company, as an analytics company, that we are sort of creating the right tech product, as well as, are we solving the right problem, solving the right way, trying to make sure that that's happening, and that we are delivering time and again, and that we are, generating IP in that process, that we are generating stuff that we can claim as a company, is important. But of course, the most important is to deliver to customers and make sure that they are getting value out of what we do.
And it must feel, fulfilling, given the impact that you guys are making and the kind of challenging problems that Elucidata is solving. We are all witnessing the rise of data and along with it its complexity in healthcare, which also reasons why we have data science and AI increasingly applied within the field, in the form of machine learning, which is being used in almost all clinical settings. Then we have imaging analytics for disease diagnosis, and AI, which is running strong in radiology. So how is data science or artificial intelligence making fundamental advances in healthcare, and then how is Elucidata incorporating data science to democratize healthcare?
Healthcare itself is a very short term. I think
Yeah.
I can talk about, what we're
Mhm.
doing in life sciences, and that too in early stage life sciences, where um, I think data science still means a lot of very different things. One of which I think is machine learning, but then there are others, and it's a lot of work that we do. I think still are very statistical in nature, very traditional modeling, differential equations and
Yeah.
statistics and so on. And that has a lot to do with the nature of the data that we work with. And machine learning is, usually seen to be more sort of impactful when data is repeatable, and as well as the final outcomes are. So for us, machine learning, I think, helps automate a lot of the way we have used it is to automate a lot of manual tasks, right? Things that have to be done again and again. For example, like curation of certain kind of data. Can you automate that curation, right? Whether it comes to images, or whether it comes to textual data, or semi-structured data. So that's kind of how we have used machine learning a lot at this point. Um, as well as, I think, we have used it to pick out patterns where where it's not obvious. So, from multiple kinds of data, how do you pick out patterns? But then a lot else of what we do is sort of very traditional statistical analysis and data science analysis, where there we are creating models day in and day out to take data from particular experiments and try to make sense of that. So I guess that's what the bulk of what we do looks like, and
Mhm.
where we are incorporating that is, I think, is asking the question that, if most scientists today with work with the kind of data that we work with, still work with a couple of features, and they cannot make use in real time of all of the features and all of the data that they're generating, right? So how do you solve that? How do you guide decision making in drug discovery by looking at the whole system rather than just a small part of it? So we're trying to kind of scale that, and that's I think what we do most of the time. The other big part, I think, of what we do is also thinking about how do you look at different data sets and merge them together to make sense of a system, right? Which is, again, a very very core sort of thing when you look at, especially when you're trying to model phenomena which are happening at the subcellular level. These are very very small molecules, in the range of 10 to the power minus 19, 10 to the power minus 20 meters, right? So it's a very small entity that you're trying to model, and that plays its own part as well. So what we're trying to do is to scale that up. Go from looking at one or two features to look at hundreds of features at the same time. And how do you do that over and over again in a reproducible manner, right? Which is where I think a lot of the tech that we do also comes in. And for us, I think these two are inseparable as well. Where a lot of what we do is to scale what is being done on a couple of features. So which is data engineering, and then of course there is product design. When you talk about how do you share data, how do you work collaboratively with your team, and so on. So I guess that's what it means for us.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about drug discovery and the entire workflow that you have. And there is a lot of work going on in drug development these days. And so, for the times that we're living in, when the whole world is trying to get a new vaccine out
Yeah.
to cure novel coronavirus, if you can tell us what does this process look like, or how does a drug come to market, and also which part of this phase of the entire drug development process does Elucidator's work show an impact on?
Um, it's a pertinent question for these times, but probably a drug discovery process is split into two parts, like the preclinical phase and the clinical phase, and the broad difference is that at the clinical stage, you're trying a drug or a molecule or therapy on in the clinic or on live, on real human beings. In the preclinical phase, you're trying to come up with a molecule, which is in some sense a more open-ended problem. But that's the part that we are most involved in. So we do a lot of different parts of the preclinical drug discovery process. Again, that itself can be broken down into further stages, but I won't go into that for brevity. So drug discovery looks like you sort of have a hypothesis, you have a system, you have a way to attack it which you think is interesting, and you want to work on that. And you start from there, and it almost on average takes about 4 to 5 years for a drug to get to clinical trials, and then about another 5 to 6 years to get approved as a drug. So in total, a drug typically takes about 10 to 12 years, depending on what the drug is on average, to get out of the market. That's not quite the same as the vaccines that we're talking about for
Mhm.
coronavirus, which that's a more well understood problem. That
Yeah.
still said, it typically takes about a couple of years to get a vaccine out for something, for a virus like the coronavirus. So it's an interesting time to be working in drug discovery. I mean, we are ourselves working with some approaches to try out existing drugs on corona, and I think that's the sort of the best shot that the world has to get out of this before a vaccine comes out, which typically takes longer. And so we are, for example, working with trying to see if existing drugs could be effective against coronavirus. And again, that's a problem that a lot of different people are really trying at this point. But yeah, that's
Ah,
the split of the drug discovery stage: preclinical and clinical. We work at the preclinical stage. In a
okay.
snapshot takes about 10, 12 years. Takes more than $1 billion usually. And it's one of the few processes that over time has become more lengthier and more expensive. Right? If you think of making a new car or making a new spaceship, that costs less and is faster today, but finding a drug is becoming costlier and taking more time in the last 20, 30 years. So yeah, it's partly the nature of the problem.
To be honest, I mean, having this conversation makes me realize how important it is to demystify these processes, considering the fact that a vast amount of investment is being made in drug development, and the amount of work that goes into it. So we have learned that Elucidata enables a lot of pharmaceutical and academic labs across the world. So I'd like to go a little deeper here. And I read about this framework on his Elucidata's website that enables research scientists to process and interpret their lab-generated data. So if you could throw some light on what this data science framework is all about.
We call it Epic framework. I guess is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah.
We call it Epic framework, which we think is sort of the life story of data when it comes to our domain, and that's just kind of how we see our product and what we do as well. And it starts with ingestion, which is what kind of E stands for.
Hmm.
And one of the frequent problems in this kind of data, which is I think different from business analytics or GIS data, is that the data is often not ready to just be analyzed. So that's why
Yeah,
ingestion is a very key part of the problem. It's not just about just how much data are you ingesting, which can be large as well, but also that the data often needs to go through a process of structuring before it can be analysis ready. So that's ingestion, that's E. Then P is for processing, which all of us understand. Which means essentially you go through, um, create large models and run them. And again, the problem in the kind of data that we deal with is that they're
Yeah.
often the data is not high velocity, but it's high volume,
Okay.
and high volume data, which requires a lot of modeling power to be able to uh, run. So again, some of it looks like sort of machine learning kind of GPU level modeling, but a lot of it is it's pure statistical modeling run on very high RAM and high spec machines, and done that. So that's the processing stage. I mean, there are of course other problems apart from hardware at the processing stage as well, where a lot of scientists that we work with are trying to streamline processes, and they can often be very slow. It can take days for a run of data, and how do you bring that down to something that takes minutes? Then you go to I, which we call interpretation, and that's where again it's a part a human exercise part, as well as something that can be aided by machines or data. And that's where what we try to do is we try to put the data that you have generated in the context of data that is available in the world, which can I think it's important for all kinds of data analysis, but especially for scientific analysis, it's really important because um, whatever you have learned from your particular experiment always has to be understood in the context of all that is known before that, right? Otherwise, it's kind of meaningless. So that's interpretation, and of course, interpretation has other parts where you're visualizing data, you're trying to articulate it, those, and then collaboration, which is when I think you're working with your team or your collaborators. And science is often very,
Yeah.
very collaborative. So a lot of the work we do are literally between consortiums which are spread across 10 different countries and 15 different organizations, and they're trying to together come up with, for example, a particular molecule, or just work on making a class of proteins as possible drug targets. So it's very collaborative, right? If you have
Mhm.
15 different organizations working on a problem split across geographies and across the world, collaboration again becomes a really important exercise. And of course, with the kind of data that we deal with, there are legitimate concerns around security and so on. So that's a framework that we divided. It's
Mhm.
called EPIC, and that's how we think of a lot of problems of data starting and finally ending up with something that can be useful. And we think it goes through these four stages.
Pretty comprehensive framework, and I am sure the scientists who are using it must be having making it must be making it easier for them. So, and I'm sure the viewers will be jotting down all these points. So now, shifting the focus from Elucidata to your career trajectory. So,
Yeah.
from mathematics and computing engineer to being the CTO of an organization, a biotech organization, and then augmenting labs at big pharma companies and medical institutions. Uh, what, what was this journey like?
I mean, look, um, bold. The definition of bold decisions varies upon
Yeah, yeah,
who's talking about it, and I think a lot of people make really, really bold decisions.
yeah.
I don't think I had to, frankly,
Okay.
but I started. The first job that I had after college was as a business consultant, and I worked for an organization that was spread across a few different geographies, just some business consulting, again based on data, very data heavy business consulting.
Hmm.
And I did that for a very short time because I didn't quite enjoy it as much. Um, and then I left to work for a non-profit organization working in distance education. Again, interestingly, a theme which is very, very critical to the times that we live in. And interestingly enough, my previous organization, the same nonprofit that I was part of, just got
Hmm.
mentioned by Michael Dell, who's the founder of Dell Foundation.
Yeah,
Is doing pretty cool work, and they have, it's called Avanti. You should look
yeah.
it up. They have some very cool work going on. So I did that. So it was a very, very different sort of problem, very different things that we were trying to do. And after that, I shifted to sort of working in this particular area. So yeah, it's been a varied journey. I wouldn't say that it's been had a very clear direction of where exactly I wanted to end up, and I've been following that. Um, But more than that, I think it's been around doing what I enjoy doing something that I think can be impactful, and just following that, and not, you know, not looking too far ahead as well. I think it can be very hard to predict very long term career trajectories, and I think it's just important to do things that you like, and um,
Yeah.
do them the best you can. So that was my really how I look at my career journey, and I think uh, it's worked out reasonably well. So yeah,
Yeah.
not
Well,
too
it
bad.
has. It
Yeah.
has. Well, I personally draw a lot of inspiration from your journey, and how you
Thank
carry
you.
yourself each day, aspiring to learn, solve, and help others around you. So, well, the next question that I have is related to something that is commonly misunderstood or not properly explained in the data science community. So, how much do you think does your mathematical aptitude contributes to your work in data science? And this is a very common question among all aspiring data scientists or data professionals.
I think personally for me, because my
Yeah.
undergrad and masters was also in math, and that was again a choice. I really enjoyed math, and that's why
Hmm.
again, one of those things, I enjoyed math, and I just did it without. I frankly enjoyed that more than the computer science part of what I studied. So for me, I think it's an important part. It's something that I enjoy. I enjoy reading a problem, or a certain model, and how it was built, and what is the math that went behind it.
Yeah.
um, so I think for me that way is important. Recently I've been reading about some models surrounding natural language processing, and again I enjoy some of the mathematical aspects of it, so I do read it more. But I
Hmm.
think when you talk about data science, the whole spectrum. I think there are people who are
Yeah.
a lot more mathematically inclined. There are people who are
Yeah.
a lot more inclined towards data engineering. A lot of
Yeah.
people who are sort of inclined towards understanding the domain and making sense of the data in the domain that you're working in, right? Whether that be drug discovery or whether that be finance. So I think it really varies, and then depending upon what you enjoy and what you like, I think you choose different directions or different uh, uh, you put different emphasis on different parts. Again, I think
Yeah.
some level of understanding of math and being just sure about it is of course important, because you're often interpreting results, and it won't really add up if you don't understand the fundamental math behind, for example, what a p-value means.
Yeah.
But I think you can get through to it, and it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
um, um, and so yeah, I think it really depends. I think it takes a whole village. It takes team. It takes a whole team with different kinds of information, different people,
Yeah.
to put together something very compelling. So I think I would again, a fundamental level of math is really really important, and needs to be developed, that level of understanding. But I think beyond that, you can take your own
Yeah.
route,
It can vary. Yeah.
and what not worry too much about how you know
Okay.
rarely, especially if you're applying models, I think rarely do you need to go to the level of fundamental math and understand things. I think that happens day to day. But again, that might depend upon the problems that people are solving.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know that Elucidator keeps hiring. So, when you are interviewing, what qualities do you look for in a candidate appearing for the position of a data scientist? At Elucidator.
Given as a spectrum, we look for a bunch of things. We of
Yeah.
course look for some fundamental level of understanding of mathematical concepts. We do check very exhaustively for scientific fundamentals, I would call it. I mean, not even math, but
Yeah.
just how to interpret data, how to know which one, which condition you're using, which ones you should not use, right? Like those things are important. We of course look at some basic coding skills. You don't have to be
Hmm.
a rock star, but you need to code a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
We also, I think, as an organization, also look at your ability to consume, for example, publications, and that's just
Yeah.
because it's very important in our work. And I assume that if you're working for a financial institution, they would look for different things. But for our work, publications and so forth are really important. So I think we have around with everyone where those things are also checked for, also evaluated. So So it's a spectrum. Again,
Yeah.
different people lie at different places. Some people are stronger at being able to code out stuff and build packages, or being able to pull together a web application and so on. But yeah, it's a very diverse set. And of course, communication. I think I was missing that out. I think communication is really
Mhm.
important for anybody trying to do data science, because at the end of the day, you
Yeah,
do need to communicate what you have done. So
exactly.
that's again really important. Uh,
The viewers will be making a note of all these focal points you just shared, and even if someone wants to try and apply for the position of data science
yeah,
or a data
absolutely.
analyst at Elucidata, they must be yeah, they must have a lot to take from this conversation. So next up, we have the rapid fire round, where I will keep firing questions your way, and you have like 4 to 5 seconds to respond to that question. So just keep it brief, keep it short, and
Yeah.
keep it crisp. All right. So let's start. So the first question is R or Python?
Maybe R, because in bioinformatics R is a lot more widely used than Python.
Okay.
Depends
Okay.
what you're doing. Yeah.
Okay. Given a chance to change the field of your work, which another field would you want to work in?
Interesting. I haven't thought about that. I think given the times that we live in, I think public health would be definitely an interesting area.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think I would enjoy, for example, like automated cars. Like those kind of problems are very interesting as well.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I would love to work on something like that.
Okay. Okay. Next up, a recent book that you have read that you have enjoyed reading.
Recent book that I've read, I have read quite a few of late. I really enjoyed Open by Andre Agassi. I think that's so it's a tennis sort of biography. So if you're into
Okay.
sports or if you're into tennis,
Yeah.
so it's a sort of biography. Andre Agassi was a very
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
character, I should say, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah.
Okay. What sources or platforms do you use to stay informed of the new technologies or libraries?
So I subscribe to a bunch of like email things which just land up in my inbox, and so I can just
Yeah.
follow them. I think Bioconductor has a mailing list which I think is really interesting. Our bloggers has a
Uh-huh.
pipeline which is I think pretty interesting. I think news at Y Combinator is pretty interesting to get a sense of more general tech things. And
Okay.
and I mean, there's just a lot else. I think a lot of it also is driven by what people in my team recommend, that a paper that they would sell, share, and so on and so forth. So yeah, of course,
Yeah.
I also subscribe to mailing lists by Nature and Science and those kind of things, which are sort of more related to my work.
Okay. So, given a chance to hang out with one famous personality, with whom would you like to spend an evening?
Um, I think given the times, I would say Dr. Anthony Fauci. I think I would love to spend
Yeah.
an evening with him. I think he's doing some incredible work, and
Yeah.
just the way he has been able to do it has been amazing. I think the more I learn about him, and I read a New Yorker profile on him, and I would suggest anybody wanting to read to check that out. He's quite an amazing character. He's been a top scientist for a long, long time, and
Yeah.
also been very active in public health, and that's a very, very hard intersection, right? To be a scientist of the caliber that he is, and also participate in public health is pretty much.
Yeah. So, how many hours do you usually work in a day?
I don't know, 10, 12. I mean, nothing like absurd, but yeah,
Okay.
10 or 12 hours, I guess, a day. Yeah.
And then, how do you decompress yourself?
I run, so
Uh-huh.
usually when it's allowed to run outside, then I run. But yeah, otherwise, these days I work out or cook. But yeah, I enjoy running as something that allows me to decompress.
Okay. So that was a wrap to our rapid fire round, and I have one last request to you. So if you could, if you have some final message or comment for all the aspiring data professionals.
Um, I mean, I think really take a problem which interests you. I think
Mhm.
it's not just about the tools in
Yeah.
data science. I think the best data scientists that I have at least come across apply those tools to a problem that they really sort of feel connected to, whether that be public health or whether that be drug discovery or finance or whatever. So I would, my message I think would be to really apply it to a problem area that you would enjoy and
Mhm.
would
Yeah.
really want to work with.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Shraddha. Thanks again for
Yeah, Darshan.
taking out the
Yeah,
time and sharing your deep experience in the field and demystifying these conceptions as well as misconceptions around data science. And I'm sure the viewers have a lot to take away from this enriching conversation that we've had. So thank you so much.
thanks so much. Thank you so much, man.
So I hope you must have had something to take away from this conversation that I had with Shweta. Now I plan to host a lot of data scientists, software engineers, co-founders, CEOs, CXOs of different data-driven organizations. And if you have any suggestions, thoughts, questions that you might want to ask these luminaries and experts in their fields, so feel free to comment down below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more interesting data science content. I would be releasing a video every week. So, yep, until my next video, keep learning data science with Harshit.